Greetings, my friend. You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. And that is why you are here at the DVD Shelf Movie Reviews, where movies are celebrated, not incinerated. And now we are bringing you the full story of a man who has been called the worst film director of all time. And no, I am not talking about the one they call Michael Bay. I'm talking about a man who put his very heart and soul into the films he made. A man whose blood, sweat, and tears would drip from every frame of his movies. A man who spent the better part of 3 decades constantly writing, producing, and directing despite a lack of time and money. But, my friends, one must ask, were his films any good? No. Tonight, we are giving you all of the evidence based only on the secret testimony of the miserable souls who survived the terrifying ordeal of associating themselves with the godfather of bad movies, the one and only Edward D. Wood, Jr. In this episode, we'll pop in the DVD for the 1994 Tim Burton film, Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp as the eccentric director.
I won't let you down.
And despite the film stretching the truth here and there, we'll look at the movie while simultaneously highlighting the life of the real Ed Wood, and try to discover the method behind his madness that delivered an infamous string of bad movies. Then we'll take a look at the DVD's generous helping of informative special features. And finally, like in every episode, I'll give the Ed Wood DVD my final recommendation based on this rating scale, which ranges from 1 disc being just download it, all the way to 5 discs being a must-own movie. So now let's roll camera and meet Ed Wood. Directed by Tim Burton and starring Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, Sarah Jessica Parker, Patricia Arquette, Jeffrey Jones, Lisa Marie, George the Animal Steele, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Bill Murray. It was released theatrically from Touchstone Pictures on September 30th, 1994, and the special edition DVD was released on October 19th, 2004. Born in Poughkeepsie, New York, Edward Davis Wood Jr. became fascinated by comic books, pulp magazines, and movies starting at a very young age, but it was at the age of 7 years old that he fell in love with horror movies specifically, and the singular film that instilled this obsession with the genre was none other than the 1931 Universal horror classic Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. From then on, Ed Wood's passion for horror films would drive him to become a director himself. Mere months after the 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a 17-year-old Ed Wood enlisted into the U.S. Marines, and at one point, he even had several of his front teeth knocked out by the butt of a bayonet. While fighting in the famous Battle of Guadalcanal, it's been said that Ed was wearing a brassiere and panties under his uniform, a secret he had kept to himself for many years. It's believed that Ed's mother had always wanted a girl, so she dressed Ed in skirts and dresses all the way up until he was around 12. This led Ed to develop a fetish for wearing women's clothes, specifically Angora sweaters. Ed wasn't a homosexual. In fact, he was known for being quite the womanizer, but he always felt more calm and relaxed while donning ladies' clothing, claiming that it helps him feel closer to women. After Ed finished his military service in 1946, he made his way to Hollywood. His show business career began when he started making short western films and directing commercials and series pilots during the early days of television. He also wrote and acted in several plays. Around this time, Ed's good friend, writer and producer Alex Gordon, introduced Ed to his childhood idol, Bela Lugosi. Now, the Ed Wood film gives no mention to Alex Gordon, but does include a pretty funny fictionalized version of how Ed first met an elderly Lugosi as he was shopping for a coffin.
Too constrictive. I can't even fold my arms.
Mr. Lugosi, why are you buying a coffin?
I'm planning on dying soon.
No.
Yes, I'm embarking on another bus and truck tour of Dracula, 12 cities in 10 days, if that's conceivable.
Do you know that I saw you perform Dracula in Poughkeepsie in 1938?
That was a terrible production. Renfield was a drunk.
I thought it was great. You know, you're much scarier in real life than you are in the movie.
Thank you.
By this point in his life, Hungarian-born Bela Lugosi was in his early 70s and washed up as an actor. It had been over 20 years since his career peaked when he played Count Dracula on both stage and screen, and due to typical Hollywood typecasting and his thick Hungarian accent, of which he was always self-conscious, Lugosi's fame never truly transcended the monster movie genre.
You know which movie of yours I love, Mr. Lugosi? The Invisible Ray. You were great as Karloff's sidekick.
Karloff? Sidekick? Fuck you! Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit! That limey cocksucker can rot in hell for all I care!
And by the time his paths crossed with Ed Wood's, Lugosi was now living in near poverty and addicted to hard drugs such as morphine and formaldehyde. During the last few years of his life, Lugosi and Ed became good and loyal friends, which led to Lugosi getting cast in several of Ed's feature films in the years to come. In 1953, notorious exploitation film producer George Weiss set his sights on making a biographical film about Christine Jorgensen, the first person to gain celebrity status by undergoing a male-to-female sex change operation. George Weiss sent out a call for a director capable enough to make a movie dealing with this kind of subject matter, and, in a rather gutsy move, Ed exaggerated his experience in filmmaking to Weiss while stressing that he had certain qualifications that made him the perfect director for the movie, as seen here in this clip.
Well, Mr. Weiss, look no further. I'm your man. I work fast and I'm a deal. I write and direct, and I'm good.
There's about 500 guys in this town that can say the same thing. On the phone, you said you had some special qualifications?
I like to dress in women's clothing.
You a fruit?
No, not at all. I love women.
So reluctantly, George Weiss decided to take a chance and finance Ed's film, which ended up being more of a personal story about him dealing with being a heterosexual transvestite than a biopic about a famous transgender. Ed Wood wrote and directed this docudrama and even starred in it under the pseudonym Daniel Davis. The film's love interest was played by Ed's real-life girlfriend at the time, actress Dolores Fuller. After recently befriending Bela Lugosi, Ed wrote him into the film as well, giving him a very strange role as the film's ominous narrator while Lugosi played it as if it were straight out of a horror movie.
Hold the string! Hold the string!
Just 4 days of shooting and $26,000 later, Ed Wood completed his film entitled Glen or Glenda, and despite the fact that Ed unapologetically laid out the best-kept secrets about his personal life in this film, it ended up being hastily written and completely incoherent, as Ed heavily relied on stock footage to fill the gaps in the story, not to mention Lugosi's completely bizarre and nonsensical monologues.
Beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys, puppy ducktails, and big fat snails. Beware. Take care. Beware.
But since Ed Wood is essentially writing a personal autobiography of sorts, lends a certain charm to the odd final product. On top of that, Ed was limited to time and money, which was the case with just about anything he was ever involved with. He had no time or even interest to do multiple takes for an actor to play out the scene. Ed almost always used the first take, no matter how flawed it was.
And cut. Perfect. Print it. Let's move on.
Don't you want to do another take, Ed? Looks like Big Baldy had a little trouble getting through the door.
No, it's fine. It's real. You know, in actuality, Lobo would have to struggle with that problem every day.
After seeing Glen or Glenda, producer George Weiss was furious. However, before production on the film began, Weiss had pre-sold it to play in several theaters, so after a small theatrical run, the movie was never publicly seen again until many years later.
Nobody wants to see this piece of shit.
Hey, you can't talk that way about my movie.
Your movie? I wish it was your movie. I wish I hadn't blown every dime I ever made into making this stink bomb. And if I ever see you again, I'll kill you.
In 1954, Ed directed, produced, and co-wrote another low-budget film called Jailbait, done in the style of a 1930s-era gangster flick. Ed Wood had once again cast Bela Lugosi in the film, but Lugosi had to drop out due to a sudden illness. Also around this time, Ed had started to meet and surround himself with a group of eclectic B-movie actors and TV personalities. This group included 400-pound Swedish professional wrestler Tor Johnson, actor and drag queen John Bunny Breckenridge, actress and model Mila Nurmi, also known as TV's very first horror hostess, Vampira, and entertainer Jerome Koenig, better known as the Amazing Criswell, a rather inaccurate psychic. Several other actors and entertainers became a part of Ed Wood's loyal band of Hollywood misfits, but the Ed Wood film tends to focus mainly on these few, who in real life had pivotal roles in Ed's life aside from Bela Lugosi and Ed's several girlfriends and wives. As Lugosi's health continued to decline, Ed Wood went into production on his next film in 1953, a monster movie which at the time was entitled The Atomic Monster, then later called Bride of the Atom.
Ah. Atomic age stuff, huh? I like it. I like it.
The movie starred Bela Lugosi in his final speaking role as the evil Dr. Eric Voronoff, a mad scientist hell-bent on conquering the world by creating a superior race of atomic beings. Voronoff's brutish lab assistant, Lobo, was played by Tor Johnson. Voronoff keeps in a tank a pet monster octopus that was created by a combination of stock footage of a real octopus and a cheap, lifeless model octopus that only moved when its victims were caught in its clutches and had to flail the tentacles around themselves.
And cut! That was perfect.
In the middle of filming Bride of the Atom, Ed ran out of money and the production was put on indefinite hiatus. Finally, Ed was able to scrounge up some more budget money from Arizona farmer and meatpacking mogul Donald McCoy, who in the Ed Wood film is played by Rance Howard, the father of actor and director Ron Howard.
How can I make you happy?
I got a son. A little slow, but a good boy. And something tells me he'd make a hell of a leading man.
Sounds perfect.
And so it was. Ed Wood was forced to cast Don McCoy's son Tony in the film so he would be granted the funds to finish Bride of the Atom. Finally, in 1955, the film was completed and released under the new title, Bride of the Monster. During the film's post-production stage, Bela Lugosi's health took another downturn as his drug use became more severe and he decided to check himself into a drug rehabilitation center. It's been said that the money that was raised at the premiere for Bride of the Monster went to help pay for Lugosi's hospital expenses. While being a patient at the clinic, Lugosi enthusiastically granted interviews to the press about his drug problems, saying that he was just happy to be in the limelight again for no matter what reason, and it's believed that Lugosi was the first celebrity to be open about being in drug rehab. After about 3 months, Lugosi left the clinic excited to get back to work, and in this rare interview, Lugosi gives a little insight on his next project.
I feel like $1 million. You feel like regular relief, folks, huh? Sure. That is best. I'm looking forward to work again. I understand that. I had an assignment playing the star part in The Goes West. Yes, and Eddie Woods will be the producer. And you're going to enter that as soon as you leave there. Surely.
Now, in the Ed Wood film, Lugosi is anxious to start acting again, so to simply appease his friend, Ed films some footage of him in front of his own house. Now this works great in the film because it helps to further illustrate the give-and-take friendship between Ed and Lugosi, but that's not quite how it happened in real life. Ed wants to begin production on a new film idea entitled The Ghoul Goes West, so he spends what little money he has to do a day's worth of filming Lugosi wearing his Dracula cape outside of Tor Johnson's home and in a cemetery. The random shots had no audio and Ed had no real story in mind while filming these scenes. He just wanted to have some shots of Lugosi to help sell his new film to potential backers. This would be the last footage ever filmed of Bela Lugosi, who died of a heart attack in August of 1956 at the age of 73. And yes, Lugosi was actually buried wearing his Dracula cape. With his dear friend dead and buried, Ed now has this footage of Lugosi that he wants to write a film around, but as always, he has zero money to go into production. Still, Ed finishes a script that blends horror and science fiction and titles it Grave Robbers from Outer Space. Ed's landlord at this time, a devout Southern Baptist, is trying to raise enough money with his church to produce 12 epic movies about the 12 Apostles, an idea inspired by Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. With the church only having enough funds to make one film, Ed convinces his landlord to let him direct a genre film that will be so successful it will bring in the money that will allow his church to make the proposed 12 Apostles movies. Under the condition that Ed and several of his friends and cast members be baptized into the church, a handful of the Baptists agree to financially support Ed's script for Grave Robbers from Outer Space.
How do you do it? How do you get all your friends to get baptized just so you can make a monster movie?
It's not a monster movie. It's a supernatural thriller.
Ed's frustrations begin to mount, however, as the church members constantly demand changes to the script, including the film's title, which is later changed to Plan 9 from Outer Space. Before production begins, Ed realizes that he'll need a body double for Bela Lugosi to fill in what his pre-recorded footage can't cover. He hires his wife's chiropractor, Dr. Tom Mason, even though Mason looks nothing like Lugosi. In the film, Mason walks around at night, covering most of his face with a Dracula cape. Then the footage will awkwardly cut to a shot of the real Lugosi in broad daylight. It was indeed in poor taste, but Ed never really saw it that way. Aside from the Lugosi body double, Plan 9 from Outer Space encompasses all of the infamous Ed Wood isms that make the film so strangely memorable, including the reliance of stock footage, cheap set design and effects, and horrendous acting.
Stronger.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid! That's all I'm taking from you. Get back here, you jerk! Let him finish.
And this is the movie that has it all. We have paper plate UFOs that hang from fishing wire. We have flimsy cardboard gravestones constantly getting pushed around and knocked over into the dirt and grass that's visibly just a carpet. There's recently fired TV horror hostess Vampira who, desperate for money, agrees to be in the film, but after reading Ed Wood's ridiculous dialogue, decides to play her part mute. We have the famous shot of an undead Tor Johnson getting stuck as he attempts to rise from his grave. There's an alien race that, due to no budget for makeup effects, looks exactly like us. And the list goes on and on. And over the years, Plan 9 from Outer Space has become one of the most recognizable and iconic examples of poor filmmaking in history, making it one of cinema's most famous cult classics. Hell, it even got a recent Blu-ray release. And the Ed Wood film does an amazing job at recreating scenes from Plan 9 as we watch Ed tearfully marvel at his creation while being delusional enough to think that he's making a truly poignant film. Thankfully, the Ed Wood movie ends on a happy note as we see Ed emotionally satisfied with Plan 9 while he watches it at a crowded premiere amongst an enthusiastic audience. But sadly, that scene was completely fictitious, and Ed Wood's real life never had that happy of an ending. Once Plan 9 was finished in 1959, it had no big premiere, opening just as small as any of Ed Wood's other films. Ed went on to write, produce, and direct Night of the Ghouls in 1959, which is considered to be an indirect sequel to Bride of the Monster. It was after Night of the Ghouls that Ed's career began its downward spiral. As Ed came to the realization that he'd never become a great filmmaker, he settled for writing and directing adult films, some still retaining the horror and sci-fi imagery from his earlier work. Ed slipped into a deep depression and developed a heavy drinking problem. And to make ends meet, Ed would begin writing short stories and novels that were almost always adult-themed, and his filmmaking regressed to straight-up porn. He would write and/or direct adult films with titles like Orgy of the Dead, Fugitive Girls, and Necromania. And while knee-deep in poverty, depression, and alcoholism, Ed Wood died of a heart attack at the age of 54 in 1978. Over the years, Ed's films were always running late at night on TV, but it wasn't until the 80s that Ed's films were starting to gain a true fan base. Audiences began to appreciate the entertainment value in Ed's campy filmmaking. Ed's career was seeing a renaissance that, sadly, Ed wasn't around to experience. As more books, TV specials, and documentaries were being published and produced, people got to know Ed Wood as a person, and his personal story became just as interesting, if not more so than his output. Also, a new generation of screenwriters and filmmakers were starting to emerge who grew up and were influenced by Ed's films. Take, for instance, screenwriters Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. Both being graduates of the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts, the two writers became good friends in college due to their mutual love of bad movies. And being Ed Wood fans, the writing team briefly discussed shooting a documentary their sophomore year about Ed Wood that would have been titled The Man in the Angora Sweater. However, the project was abandoned after they figured that no one would ever really want to watch it. During their tenure at U.S.A, Alexander and Karaszewski co-wrote the script for what would eventually become the 1990 comedy Problem Child starring John Ritter. With Problem Child being a decent hit at the time, the writing duo returned to pen the sequel a year later. But they were frustrated that the Problem Child movies had pigeonholed them into being hired for strictly writing family comedies. To hopefully shed this reputation, they decided to write a biopic about Ed Wood and pitched it to their college friend, director Michael Lehman, who at the time was known mainly for his 1989 dark comedy Heathers. They also pitched their Ed Wood idea to Heathers producer Denise Denovi, who had also previously produced 3 of Tim Burton's films, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, and The Nightmare Before Christmas. Tim Burton, another longtime Ed Wood fan, came on as producer with Denise Denovi and Michael Lehman as the director. However, Lehman had previously struck a deal to direct the comedy Airheads, so he had to back out of directing Ed Wood. Tim Burton excitedly took the director's chair, while Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski turned in their script, which only took them 6 weeks to write. And after Columbia Pictures turned down Burton's idea of having the film be in black and white, Burton was able to strike a deal with Disney after giving the studio a hit film with The Nightmare Before Christmas in 1993, so Ed Wood was released under Disney's Touchstone Pictures. But when the film was released in the fall of 1994, not even names like Johnny Depp and Tim Burton could get audiences to go see this offbeat R-rated black and white biopic about the worst director of all time, which led to the film bombing at the box office despite widespread critical praise. But just like Ed Wood's own movies, Tim Burton's Ed Wood eventually found its audience. And once it's all said and done, there just aren't enough good things to say about Ed Wood. It's just one of those special films where you can see its director having complete creative control without any studio interference, and Burton's fandom and passion for Ed Wood is clearly visible. The stylistically minimal production design certainly takes you right back to the 1950s, but more specifically, it makes it feel like one of Ed Wood's own movies. Now obviously this is a much more competent film than anything Ed Wood ever made, but the spirit still lingers. Also, the brilliant idea of filming in black and white really puts you in the time period and even leads to a funny scene where the movie pokes fun at its lack of color.
Say, Bill, which dress works better for you, the red one or the green one?
Which one is the red one?
What do you mean?
I mean, I can't see the difference. I'm colorblind. But I kind of like the dark gray one.
The film doesn't hold anything back when it comes to celebrating the cheap techniques Ed used to make his movies, and it succeeds at turning Ed Wood's entourage of Hollywood outcasts into a lovable group of offbeat personalities. Johnny Depp gives a stellar performance as Ed Wood, and even though he doesn't really look or talk like the actual guy, he does give off a certain likable earnestness and an almost childlike enthusiasm to the character. So in the long run, his entertaining and colorful performance outweighs how little he resembles the real Ed. You still believe that Ed Wood is delusional enough to think he's making high art with his films, and you sympathize with him when life keeps dealing him bad hands.
Worst film you ever saw? Well, my next one will be better. Hello?
This was Johnny Depp's second time working with director Tim Burton after his nearly mute starring role in Edward Scissorhands in 1990. Since Ed Wood, Depp and Burton have collaborated on 6 more film projects: Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, Sweeney Todd, Alice in Wonderland, and the upcoming vampire flick Dark Shadows. Ed Wood's entourage is also perfectly cast, not only in looks but also in character. Tim Burton's then-girlfriend, model Lisa Marie, was a perfect match for TV horror hostess Vampira. Professional wrestler George the Animal Steele is a dead ringer for wrestler Tor Johnson. Jeffrey Jones, who was previously in Tim Burton's Beetlejuice, blends in well as Criswell, and Bill Murray brings a hilarious deadpan delivery to Bunny Breckenridge. Interestingly, the film concocts a fictionalized chance meeting between Ed Wood and legendary filmmaker Orson Welles, played by Vincent D'Onofrio.
Do you know that I've even had producers recut my movies?
I hate when that happens.
And they're always trying to cast their buddies. It doesn't even matter if they're right for the part.
Tell me about it. I'm supposed to do a thriller at Universal, but they want Charlton Heston to play a Mexican.
Welles had always been a hero of the real Ed Wood, and D'Onofrio bears a striking resemblance to him. But helping D'Onofrio speak in Welles's distinguishable voice was voice actor Maurice LaMarche, who dubbed D'Onofrio's lines.
Is it all worth it?
It is when it works. You know, the one film of mine where I had total control, Kane. The studio hated it, but they didn't get to touch a frame.
Now you may not know Maurice LaMarche by name, but he will always be known to kids of the 90s as the voice of Brain, the lab rat with dreams of world domination from Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs.
Scientists have just reported that a large, unidentified flying object seems to be heading towards Earth. There is no cause for alarm, but there probably will be.
Brain's voice was clearly inspired by the uncanny vocal stylings of Orson Welles, and Maurice LaMarche lovingly brings his Brain voice back to the man who first inspired it.
Brilliant performance.
But the standout has to be Martin Landau playing Bela Lugosi.
All right, let's shoot this fucker.
Great.
His mannerisms and accent almost make you forget that you're not watching the real Bela Lugosi on screen. The last several years of Lugosi's life were indeed tragic, but Landau makes Lugosi both pitiful and hilarious at the same time.
Bella, you'll be sitting there, okay?
I'm not getting near that goddamn thing. One of them burned me on the return of Shandu.
All right. And you'll be sitting there. Good.
But what helped enhance his already amazingly calculated performance was the makeup, designed by multiple Oscar-winning makeup effects wizard Rick Baker. Now, Martin Landau obviously looks nothing like Bela Lugosi, but Rick Baker was able to subtly manipulate Landau's facial features to make him almost a caricature of the real Lugosi. And with the film being shot in black and white, Baker cleverly designed the makeup to appear a little more theatrical than downright realistic by using stark shadows to exaggerate and accentuate the wrinkles on his face. Still, it was the perfect blend of Landau's performance and Baker's makeup that truly brought Lugosi back from the grave, if only for 2 hours. And deservedly, the film's 2 1994 Oscar wins went to Martin Landau for Best Supporting Actor and Rick Baker for Best Makeup Design. So here we have the special edition DVD for Ed Wood, which manages to bring us some pretty insightful special features. First off, we have a Tim Burton directed music video featuring Lisa Marie dressed to resemble Vampira and dancing to Howard Shore's main theme for Ed Wood. Next we have a montage of behind-the-scenes footage featuring Tim Burton as he directs several of his actors, where we even get some rare glimpses of color footage. Then there's a short piece about the theremin, a Russian electronic instrument that was commonly used in musical scores for sci-fi and horror films during the 1950s and was heavily used in the score for Ed Wood. After that we have my personal favorite feature, a look at the conceptualization and application of the Rick Baker designed makeup that transformed Martin Landau into Bela Lugosi. Then there's another short documentary that chronicles the challenges of being a production designer on a black and white movie. Rounding out the special features, there's a feature-length cast and crew audio commentary, the theatrical trailer, and deleted scenes.
Bravo! Bravo!
Now I could probably spend another couple hours explaining why Ed Wood is such an entertaining film, but I only have so much time. Ultimately, I guess the film could be summed up in one simple statement of irony. By making a film about the worst director of all time, not only does it become one of Tim Burton's strongest films, but it's also, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies about making movies.
I like that!
Whether or not you're an aspiring filmmaker, there's a little Ed Wood in all of us, which makes his story so engaging and relatable. And even though I think it goes without saying, I'm giving Ed Wood a 5 out of 5 discs recommendation. This is a must-own movie.
Great!
My friends, you have just witnessed the life of Edward D. Wood Jr. based on sworn testimony. Can you prove that it didn't happen? Perhaps you will one day enjoy Tim Burton's Ed Wood, or maybe even some of Ed Wood's actual films. We once laughed at this man who has since become a man of legend. Who knows who or what his films will inspire next? God help us in the future, for that is where you and I will meet again. But for now, this one's going back on the DVD shelf.
Cut. That's a wrap.
Do I really have a face like a horse?